Welcome to the International Straight Talk video series on the big emerging markets of the 1990s and beyond. The international marketplace for high-quality American goods and services is changing rapidly, and along with these changes come major new opportunities for American business. Of course, it takes specialized skills and know-how to compete successfully in foreign markets, and we believe that no area holds greater potential competitive advantages for American business than time and effort spent mastering the critical people side of doing business internationally. That's why the International Small Business Development Center, William Drake & Associates, GTE, TU Electric, and Texas Instruments have joined together to sponsor this video series. The writer, developer, and producer of the International Straight Talk video series and accompanying computer applications is Bill Drake, an internationally recognized speaker, trainer, and innovator in the area of business applications of human relation skills.
Hello, and welcome to the International Straight Talk series, produced jointly by the North Texas International Small Business Development Center, an agency of the Dallas County Community College District, and by William Drake & Associates. We gratefully acknowledge the ongoing support of the U.S. Small Business Administration for the development of these programs. This International Straight Talk video is designed to help your American business, especially if you're an American small or mid-sized business, to be more effective in Mexico. In addition to instructional narrative, throughout the video, you'll find interviews with experienced American businessmen and women, offering their frank advice to other Americans like you who want to gain competitive advantage in the high-potential emerging market of Mexico. In Part 1, we'll cover 3 vital things you need to know to be effective in Mexico. American business people who understand what it takes to build and maintain close friendships can enjoy a major competitive advantage in Mexico, and we'll look closely at the core of this topic. We'll also discuss a few simple steps any American can take which will enable them and their business to stand out in the estimation of potential Mexican business associates. Finally, there's a simple low-cost strategy available to anyone who wants to use Mexican networks to accomplish just about any business or professional objective. All it takes is some time and some commitment, and we'll discuss in detail how to go about doing it. How would you like a business development strategy for Mexico which costs you nothing, which you can implement immediately, and which will begin yielding measurable benefits right away? Here it is. With the exception of acquiring competency in Spanish, nothing you can do will materially improve your competitive position in Mexico as much as a few hours spent learning enough about Mexican history to ask intelligent questions during conversations with Mexican associates as you go through the courtship phase of business. Now, please don't turn off the video. I'm not suggesting you have to sign up for a college course in Mexican history. Although if you're really committed to doing good business in Mexico, you might very well consider doing just that. What I'm saying is that there's a readily available competitive advantage for any American business person or professional who can capitalize on the general American reputation for not knowing or caring anything about the history of Mexico or about the real Mexico outside of the resort areas. Educated, successful Mexican businessmen and women are almost universally interested in and informed about their own culture's history, and many are what Americans would call history buffs. Many, if not most, Mexican business people are also acutely aware of the complex history between the U.S. and Mexico, and it will be very much to your advantage to inform yourself at least enough to understand that there are some very different perspectives in Mexico on this history. So here's what I'm suggesting as one of your most cost-effective strategies as an independent business person or as a business owner-manager. Simply spend a few pleasurable hours reading and thinking about such things as: how did modern post-revolutionary Mexico come to be what it is today? What were the magnificent Mexican, Olmec, Mayan, and Toltec civilizations in their context at their time? And how did the events of history that affected Mexican and Americans generate the stereotypes that we each have of each other today? Then try to frame some questions which interest you personally on some aspect of this rich and complex history which you would actually like to know more about. And be ready to drop this kind of question into the social conversations which inevitably accompany any developing business relationship in Mexico. Now, this preparation alone will equip you to distinguish yourself in the eyes of potential Mexican business associates from the hordes of Americans rushing south of the U.S. border just because they want in on the action and not really caring at all about who they're dealing with. In other words, as your Mexican associates know all too well, no understanding, no respect.
In this country, we say that time is money, and we're very conscious of time. In Mexico, in particularly, you must be conscious of the fact that money requires time, and you must make the investment in time, or you will not do any business. The Mexicans place a great deal of emphasis on personal relationships, and once they are established, they're very loyal with those relationships.
One of the best things you can do to begin acquiring a perspective on your own culture is to begin interacting with another culture here in the U.S. before venturing outside the U.S. on business. With such a rich and diverse Mexican American and Latin American culture in most of the U.S., there are widespread opportunities for American business people from non-Spanish speaking backgrounds to get involved with people in Mexican and Latino business and social organizations and groups. The more comfortable, personal, relaxed, and open a non-Latino American can be with Latino associates and friends in the U.S., the more effective they will inevitably be with potential associates in Mexico. Mexican American business people will also benefit from joining organizations where they can interact with business people from Mexico and elsewhere in Latin America, since a common heritage and even a common language doesn't necessarily mean a common culture or business understanding. Many Mexican-American business people and professionals have been surprised to discover that new Mexican business acquaintances have considered them principally American and not all that close in a cultural sense. This may sound simplistic, but please don't overlook it as one of the most cost-effective strategies that an American independent or small business person can pursue, whatever their cultural heritage.
Americans have to be aware of their stereotyping of foreigners, but we also, it's very useful to be aware of how the foreigners stereotype us. And has been said, it's extremely useful and can be and can put you in a competitive advantage to understand those stereotypes of yourself and to work around them and to surprise your guests.
Obtaining quality information and knowing what to do with it are both critical to successful business in Mexico. While Mexico is a modern, information-rich environment, a lot of critical information is not in data form, but instead passes verbally from person to person along those networks we've mentioned. As a professional, you already know that it's critical to have good information on such things as business practices, regulatory environments, financial instruments, and contracts prior to arriving in Mexico to do business. What you also have to keep in mind is that in Mexico, access to high-quality information often depends upon who you know and how you know them. In other words, the information gathering part of business development can't be done very effectively at a distance, nor can it be done without some initial expenditure of time in meeting and establishing your sources. Knowing who to ask and how to ask them is as important in Mexico as knowing what to ask. This is another area where the counselors at your International Small Business Development Center can help.
We are very much in an age of computers, an age of information, an age of electronics. That's well and good, but clearly what we need to do is we need to understand the market a little bit better, and that's where the human side of business comes in. It's very important that in Mexico, as we look at our databases through internet and through other different database sources, that we also learn that that only gives us so much information. We need to talk to people. We need to get answers. And the best way of doing that is to get right in front of the person that you want to understand an issue and ask the question.
An important observation, but one which some Americans will dismiss as sounding too much like social philosophy instead of business, is that who you are as a person is a key to doing good business in Mexico. This means letting Mexican business associates gradually get to know those good sides of yourself which you customarily reserve just for those closest to you in the U.S. You know, in the United States, we pride ourselves on being able to do business with total strangers over the phone, or with individuals we don't even like very much, or even with people we don't trust. This isn't the norm in Mexico. In fact, it's very likely that your Mexican associates will notice and misinterpret matters if you keep too much of yourself too far in reserve. Regardless of whether you're normally gregarious or maybe a little distant with other people, it will pay to go to Mexico prepared in advance with conversational subjects that will help you reveal your personal side, with topics such as, what are some of the things you enjoy the most about your good friends? What are your main interests outside of work? Has someone in your family done something special that you're very proud of? Is there an elderly relative who is especially dear to you? Do you have a favorite Mexican writer or artist? And what are you most proud of about your spouse and your children? Being prepared in advance to show your personal side to good advantage is an important part of being effective in business in Mexico.
We're a family-owned business. We are approximately 20 years old. Well, we soon will be 20 years old. And because we are a family-owned business, we found it rather easy to talk with other family-owned businesses in Mexico. And in truth, in Mexico and all over the world, we deal many times with family-owned businesses. So it was actually very enjoyable for us and very easy for us to be able to relate to these people on a different level perhaps than, say, a large corporation would have been able to relate. We were already accustomed to showing the pictures of the grandchildren, talking about our married children, and since we do have grandchildren, then we were very able to exclaim over their own children and to enjoy them and to understand their constraints and what they had, when they needed to be apart or away for family matters.
The roots of Mexican culture run broad and deep in a country with a landscape as wildly diverse as its people. While many of us carry around images of Mexico which include beautiful mountains, rugged coastlines, ancient ruins, and great mysterious works of art, we generally fail to truly appreciate that Mexico is a 3,000-year-old continuous civilization, ranking along with Egypt and India, Mesopotamia, and China as a cradle of civilization. Now, out of this history has evolved a complex human relations environment, which must be studied carefully by any American business person who anticipates making a serious commitment to the Mexico market. One of the consequences of Mexico's complex history is that Mexicans have very strong regional as well as ethnic and national identity. Just as in the U.S., people from either coast or from the north and the south may share common regional characteristics like accents, attitudes, and even regional personalities, so also people from Mexico City, Monterrey, and Guadalajara see each other as somewhat different, and in fact they are. Among other things, this means that when you do business in Mexico City, you may indeed find lingering remnants of that long, lazy Mexican business lunch. But don't be surprised if your lunch meeting in Monterrey ends promptly,